Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom with our host, Bob Olson, who will now introduce today's show and speaker.
WCAT Radio now brings you the open door. I have left an open door before you, which no one can close. Open to the love of God. Open to joining the stream of love for others. And a wonderful panel again today, starting with Dr. Rhonda Chervin, who is a Catholic writer in Corpus Christi, Texas. Dr. Richard Garrity from Birmingham, Alabama. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Richard.
Thank you.
Professor of philosophy at EWTN, writer of books about Aristotle's Ethics, Plato's Republic, who's also writing a book about Blessed Cardinal Newman's Apologetics. And then we have Dr. James Hannock from Los Angeles, philosophy professor, father of 5 children, pro-life activist, editor at New Oxford Review, and then Commander Al Hughes from Corpus Christi, Texas, colonel in the Air Force, a married father who converted to the church from being an agnostic and also has degrees in engineering and in pastoral studies. And so, Commander Al, take it away.
Thank you, Bob. And I'd like to say good morning to our audience. We are now live. And we also have a capability that the audience can call in. I'll give you the number now and then several times during the program. Get your pencils ready. It's area code 515-604-9344. And then you will need an access code, which is 914121. So call in with any questions or comments that you have. Now, today's topic is the panel members' most memorable spiritual and religious moments. And should be interesting. There's a lot of experience amongst the panel here, and so who would like to start out?
Not me.
Well, now, I was trying to be nice and humble by not seizing the stage. This is Rhonda, the drama queen. So, but if nobody else wants to speak, many of the huge religious experiences that I had, I've said over and over again on the Old Open Door, which, by the way, you can find the Old Open Door on a website called Spirituality Running to God, and we have about 3 years of programs on that, or maybe less, but I don't know. But in any case, and also on this show. So what I would like to focus on is one that I've spoken about less, and is probably the most important, well, not never, you don't have to figure out. See, the word most, Al, that you suggested for this, is it makes people uneasy, because how do you really evaluate if you have many of these kind of experiences, as I do? How do you figure out, was it more important that Jesus' face came alive, which brought me into the Catholic Church, or was it more this other one, That's very hard to figure out. In fact, we can't figure it out. But I have a little preface to this. Okay. No one gets canonized because of having mystical experiences, because Satanists have mystical experiences every day of the wrong kind. So having supernatural experiences doesn't make you automatically holy. You're holy if you have heroic virtue from the grace of God. And there are people who have heroic virtue who do things that I could never do, I don't think I could do half as well, who don't have what people think of as mystical experiences, that is, enhanced experiences beyond faith of supernatural realities. which doesn't mean that such people don't sometimes get a lift of the heart when they're at Holy Mass, but they're not mystical experiences in the sense of visions or audible locutions or stigmata or things like that. Okay, so with that preface in mind, one of the supernatural experiences that I treasure the most and that helped me the most in life happened this way. But before I go into that, does anyone want to comment on what I just said in case you think I'm wrong?
No, get on with it.
Okay, so anyone who's listening for the first time, it happens that all of the people on this panel are very good friends of mine. And so this laughter has a very definite meaning. So knowing I'm a drama queen and also a philosophy teacher who debates very well, nobody wants to debate with me, at least on this thing. Okay. Thank you all, dear friends, for putting up with me. So the situation was this. I was in the parish, and there were these parish women who were part of a Lady of Fatima group. And they would be at daily Mass, and they would lead the rosary that I always attended because I always went to daily Mass. And I thought they were a little extreme. They were the type of women who wear blue on every Marian feast and who make clothes for the statue of the little infant Jesus and things like that. So even though I admired them, I had a little sardonic feeling about them, let's say. Okay, so they come up to me and they say, Rhonda, the statue of Our Lady of Fatima, this is a replica, this is a statue of Our Lady of Fatima that's usually in Fatima, Portugal, because the apparition was there, but that the statue goes around the whole world to these groups, and then they put them in houses for a few days and say special consecration prayers at the same time. So they said, we have the statue of Our Lady of Fatima. Can we bring her to your house for just around Christmas, before and after Christmas? And I said, well, I'm very religious, but the rest of the people in the family aren't particularly religious. Maybe she would feel neglected there. Give her to someone else. And they looked at me and they said, no one wants her for Christmas. So I was horrified. So I said, of course I'll take her. So they come to bring the statue. Now, I'm thinking it's a little statue that's going to sit on my desk. Well, they come with a coffin-like box with a huge statue of Our Lady of Fatima, and they put her on the dining room table, and then it happened to be a very busy day. These details are necessary for the impact of the miracle. So they put her on the table. It's a very busy day. So when they open up this fat booklet of prayers and begin with the prayers, I'm thinking, oh my God, this could last for half an hour. I've got to get on with my life. But of course I couldn't say that. So I open up the booklet of prayers, and within the booklet of prayers, there's a sentence where you say, Dear Mary, take out my heart and put in my heart your immaculate heart. So, there are many statements like that are theologically a little exaggerated, let's say, and I just put up with them. But I muttered the prayer. I just muttered the prayer with them. And immediately, I felt this fantastic peace flood my whole frenetic little body. And I felt this peace come over me. And immediately afterwards that night, I was up all night with all sorts of interior, not visible, but interior visions of saints, Mary, Jesus, and words in my heart flowing, about beautiful words about God's love for me and this kind of thing. So I run to my spiritual director, and he says, well, Rhonda, that's beautiful, but don't go around boasting about this because maybe it'll go away, this peace, and then you'll feel like an idiot because I'm a very angry person, so no one thinks of me as peaceful, so they're going to be stunned. But then if 2 weeks from now you're still yelling at everybody, it's not going to look so good, so don't boast about this. However, it lasted for 2 years, that peace. So all of you who know me will realize that was a fantastic supernatural experience. That's all for me.
That's a miracle in itself, Rhonda.
I could see that, yes. The only one who knew me then, the only one here who knew me then was Jim, but I don't think I talked to you about it, Jim. Because I was busy keeping it silent so that no one would laugh at me.
Well, some of us suspected as much.
This is Al again. For our audience sake, I'll mention the phone numbers again. You can call in. It's area code 515-604-9344. And then the access code, 914121. Call in, please, and with your questions and comments. Well, I thought, I guess I'll go next. Rhonda's right. I was sitting here this morning saying, all right, Al, which is the most important? And you really can't make that decision. So I decided to mention something that is not in any of the books I've written on the subject. This happened about 25 years ago. We were in California, and John Paul II was in Los Angeles. And my wife and I chaperoned a busload of teenagers down there to hear now St. John Paul. There was one event down there where only teenagers were allowed, and other than their chaperones, and that's how we got into the place. A huge auditorium. There must have been 3,000 teenagers in there, if you can picture that. And John Paul was alone on the stage. We were off to his right in the 7th row, so we were pretty close. And he gave this wonderful talk aimed at the teenagers in there. And about midway through, he stopped, catch his breath, and somebody took him a glass of water, and so there's just this little interlude. Now, in the meantime, John Melendez was sitting in a chair in the middle of the aisle, of the central aisle, maybe 40, 50 feet away from the stage, just sitting there. And so during the interlude, he plays this beautiful piece on his guitar, beautiful thing. And it went on for probably 5 minutes or so, and it was just a magnificent music that he played. Now, what was unusual about that was John Melendez has no arms. He was a thalidomide baby, grew up without arms. His guitar was on the floor in front of him, of his chair, and it was in a brace so that it couldn't move. And he played that guitar with his toes. Professional guitarist, a professional class guitarist playing the guitar on the floor, and he's playing it with his toes. When he ended his piece, I don't think John Paul knew this was coming because he looked like lightning had hit him or something. He was standing there staring at this the whole time, and at the end of the music, he dropped down on his left knee, put his hand on the edge of the stage, and jumped down 4 or 5 feet onto the floor, ran up the center aisle, and threw his arms around John Melendez.
Wow.
Both men.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful.
both men, I could see clearly that John Melendez was weeping, and I think JP too was weeping too. It was just magnificent. And if you think about who these two men are, neither one of them should have been there. Melendez could have been sitting behind a tin cup in an alley somewhere, hoping for a little change. John Paul II was run over by a Nazi truck as a young boy, and yet both of them overcame lifetime obstacles and became who they were that day. And it's just one of those magnificent things that happened. Now, I often wonder, that was 25 years ago, I often wonder about the teens that were in that huge crowd and how many of them must have gone on with that inspiration to do great things themselves. And I don't know, but I do know one of them, because one of those teens was my daughter, Catherine, who had just got back from evangelizing 50,000 Filipinos and has also been down to Mexico City, even more recently, evangelizing down there with her team. So I wonder how many other teens that were in that crowd have followed their own star in support of the Lord. It was just an amazing thing to see.
Oh, good. Now that gives me an idea for the question that should have been posed today. It would be not your highest experience or anything, but it would be, tell us a good story. See? And Rhonda, and you just told a damn good story, and I'm riveted. See? And I think that's what stories do. Good story. Hey, people will listen.
So, Richard, have you got a story to tell?
No, I'm listening to other people's stories. But maybe at the end I'll have one. But go ahead. Let's hear someone else.
I can tell a true story.
All right.
I went to with my wife last Saturday a funeral for a dear friend, godmother of one of her children, and with her husband, I'd spent many a Saturday morning praying in front of abortion clinics. At any rate, our friend Dorothy had died after a long illness, as they say. And at the funeral, there was some commotion before the casket was introduced, and about 26 people got up and went to the back of the church and walked up with the coffin, center aisle, of course. And who were those 26 people? They were 26 of Dorothy's 28 grandchildren.
Wow!
The others were out of the country. But just before they walked up with the casket, liturgically, I would frown on this, but on special occasions, there was a fellow all in kilts playing the bagpipe. So we have the bagpipe sound, which can be a glorious sound, and then the 26 children accompanying their grandmother coming up the center aisle. And that was really moving because we'd known her for many years, and one of the noteworthy things for me about this procession is how the grandchildren look so much like the children. Not that she had 28 children, but she did have 9, and when I think back, I knew the children in many cases when they were about the age of the grandchildren. It was a strong family resemblance. But that was something that happened just very recently, and it was just truly heartwarming.
Yeah.
Well, this is Bob. Very wonderful story. That's so beautiful. Thank you for that, James. And this is not my story, but this is one of my favorite stories, and it was the first reading today at Mass. Joseph. And his father loved Joseph best of all his sons. He was the child of his old age, and he had made him a long tunic. And when his brothers saw that the father loved him best of all his sons, they hated him so much they would not even greet him. And one day they had gone to pasture the flocks, and the father said, Joseph, I'm going to send you out there to them. So Joseph went with the brothers, or after his brothers caught up with them, and they noticed him from a distance, and they plotted to kill him. Here comes that master dreamer. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns here. We could say that a wild beast devoured him. We shall then see what comes of his dreams. Well, when his brother Reuben heard this, he wanted to save him from their hands, saying, we must not take his life. Instead of shedding blood, just throw him into that cistern there in the desert, but do not kill him outright. His purpose was to rescue him from their hands and return him to his father. So when Joseph came up to them, they stripped him as the long tunic. They took him and threw him into the cistern, which was empty and dry. They then sat down to their meal, and looking up they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, their camels laden with gum, balm, and rosin to be taken down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, hey, what's to be gained by killing our brother and concealing his blood? Rather, let's just sell him to these Ishmaelites instead of doing away with him ourselves. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh. The brothers agreed. They sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And then in the responsorial psalm, it tells about when the Lord called down a famine on the land and ruined the crop that sustained them, he sent a man before them, Joseph, sold as a slave. They had weighed him down with fetters, and he was bound with chains, till his prediction came to pass, and the word of the Lord proved him true. The king sent and released him. The ruler of the people set him free. He made him lord of his house and ruler of all his possessions. Now you talk about providence. Man, that's the height of it right there.
Yeah, and you talk about a good story. I just read it this morning off the computer.
Isn't that good?
And you've got, I don't know if you're reading it off right in front of you or you're just recalling it by memory.
No, I was pretty much, I read pretty much the way it was.
Okay, yeah. And it's a good story. It's riveting. And there's power in it.
Exactly.
This is Al again, reminding our audience you can call in with questions or comments or your own stories for that matter. Our phone number, area code 515-604-9344. And the access code to get with us is 914-121. So call in and let us hear from you.
Well, I can offer another story.
Go for it.
All right. I want to begin by saying not so very long ago, but that wouldn't be true. It's been quite a while now. With a group of lay missionaries of charity. My wife and I are lay missionaries of charity. That's a group that is connected with Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity. We went to Tijuana to see Mother Teresa and to hear her speak. There are quite a group of missionaries of charity, sisters and priests centered in Tijuana. And Mother Teresa spoke briefly. She was already quite elderly at the time. And afterwards, we were invited to meet with her separately. And we did, and she spoke a bit more. And then we were allowed to come up to greet her, and she gave each of us her blessing.
Okay, Jim. Jim,
yes.
I won't let you do this. You have to say, what did she say to you?
Well, I had to get up there first.
Oh, you're not up there yet. Oh, so you knew you knew she was going to speak to you separately. All right, I thought you were out of non-boastfulness, not going to tell us what she said.
She spoke to the smaller group separately, and then we came forward, and she gave us her blessing. And she put her hands on each of our heads, and she didn't say anything. And the only thing I could think at the time was, wow, she's shorter than she looks. Well, that wasn't very holy on my part. But if you think about it, very good things can come in very small packages, and I've always remembered her power, but it's a power associated with someone who everyone sees as short, and when you are right next to her, she was shorter than that.
Right.
And
oh gosh, yes.
Made such an impression.
How short actually is she? Was she at that time about 5 feet tall?
Well, on a good day wearing high heels.
Oh, so she was about 4'8".
Which she did it, and at that point in her life, she didn't have any good days.
So did you have to sit down for her to bless you, or did she?
No, I had to kind of, I don't know what, scrunch, because I'm over 6'2". I'm over 6'2", and she might have been 4'10" or something like that. But that combination of Mother Teresa, and look at this little lady, made a powerful impression on me. Now, I won't mention anything about the time I met Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Right. Okay. All right.
I'll pass right over that.
Okay. I was thinking, Al, again, I was thinking in terms of healings, the reality of such things, and I thought I'd give an example or two there. This happened in the Caribbean when we were down there, my family, wife and myself and 2 little girls. And this was shortly after my baptism, shortly after my Pentecostal experience. My wife had the same some months earlier. Anyway, we wake up in the middle of the night one night, and little Katie, the youngest, about 2 years old, was screaming bloody murder. And my wife ran in there, and then, me, I just put the pillow over my head, and then, but right through the pillow, I hear Jeannie saying, "Al, go get the thermometer, she's burning up." So I did. I stumbled into the bathroom, found the thermometer, went into the other room to hand my wife the thermometer, and she says, "Be quiet, she's back asleep." I said, "What did you do?" She said, and my wife said, "Well, I laid hands on her forehead, I prayed, and the fever disappeared instantly."
Wow.
So we went back to bed, went back to sleep, and that was the end of that one. But that was an instantaneous healing due to just a very simple prayer, and the child slept that night. Now, this is going to sound a little odd, but about 3-4 weeks later, one of the dogs outside, we had 3 dogs outside, one of the dogs had been sick for a long time and getting worse and worse and worse, and I wasn't present for this, but some of the kids found this dog lying in the weeds dying. No question about it, the dog was dying. So Jeannie called all the kids over that were playing in the yard, and Jeannie and my wife and all the kids laid hands on Patches, that was the dog's name. They prayed for Patches for about 2 minutes while he's dying, and he kind of hiccups, stands up, and walks off. he was healed.
Oh, no, I have a dog healing story, too. I always say I like to pray over people because I feel that it's much more personal and loving than saying, I will pray for you. Someone tells you they have deadly cancer and you say, I will pray for you. It seems to me it's much more direct and New Testament-like, where it says they laid hands on people. So I ask them, can I lay hands on you? And I always say, now listen, I don't think I have the gift of healing, but it certainly can't hurt for me to pray over you. So maybe from time to time someone said something got a tiny bit better after that, but I've never had any huge experience of healing grace, though I do feel warmth going through my hands when I do that very often. However, the one that I can certify is true. Our dog had cancer of the foot, of all things, and I lay hands on that dog, and the dog was healed. God bless the dog.
God bless the dog. Yes, yes.
This is Bob. I was at Daily Mass one day a few years ago, and this lady, about halfway through the Mass, I knew her name was Peggy, and she had been rather sickly, and she had to get up and go outside. So I went with her, and a couple other ladies came out too, and we sat her down, and she says, "Oh, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I'm so tired." And I had been taught before this that you can call people back, you know. And I said, and I'm laying hands on her, of course, and I'm saying, "Peggy, come back. Peggy, come back. Peggy, come back." And she started to perk up, and then I didn't know about these ladies that were there, but I thought, well, I'm going to keep praying in tongues. I don't care, because this is so important. So I started praying in tongues, and one of the ladies got called 911, and we got the ambulance, and they took her to the hospital and everything, but she was, pretty much back to normal, and she lived for a long time after that. But I just had the sense that she was gone.
Yeah, yeah.
She just kept saying, "Oh, I'm so tired, I'm so tired," and it's just, and it was getting weaker and weaker.
Yeah.
Oh, now you all should know, anyone who's listening to this who doesn't know this, in charismatic healing prayer services, no healer who has that gift of healing, which is, we don't heal, Jesus heals through us.
Right.
We never heal anyone. But no one ever says, don't call the doctor, don't call 911, just trust if someone heals over you. Never, because that would be very imprudent.
Exactly. Well, I teach a course on to show people how to pray over their husbands, their wives, their kids, their neighbors, their whoever. And I tell them two things. I said, you can be a powerful prayer warrior. If you want to be a powerful prayer warrior, you have to remember just two things. If you can remember these two things, you'll be super. You'll be great when you lay hands on people. But you have to remember that you can't heal anyone. You remember that one. That's number one. Number two is, you're not God. And if you can remember those two things, You're going to be a tremendous healer. You believe that, Al?
Yeah.
Now.
You were reminding me of, I guess it was a coach at Notre Dame that said I just those two things. There's God and there's me, and I ain't he.
Was that Jerry? Was that Jerry or?
I don't know. I don't know who it was. But,
Jerry Faust? Probably Jerry Faust.
I have no idea. I just remember hearing that.
What were you going to say, Rhonda?
He said there's only two things I know. I know there's God, and I know there's me, and I ain't he.
Okay, I think I have a story now.
It was all the while.
Right, and the only thing, the merit of it is I still remember it because it happened when I was about 16. And I still can't figure it out, but I remember very definitely the impression I left. Now, I was in the postulate, and I was on the third floor in the dormitory. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, so it was high up, and then it was on a hill, so it looked out over a long plain way off. And I was up at 2, which was unusual because we studied and worked pretty hard. So, you went to the dorm and you slept, and then you got up the next day and continued. And so, for some reason, I was up at 2, and I was looking out the window like I was on top of the world. And I saw and heard a train from way, way off. Sort of like, I think I heard it chugging a bit, but I more or less saw the light. And I pictured, it doesn't make sense, but I pictured the light was the fire burning in the firebox, because you had steam engines then. See? And I'd watch it, the light, and it'd come and come and come and come, and I watched it and I watched it, and it took such a long time, but I was fascinated. And it came and came and came, and then it went away, and it was like I was on top of the world. It was something unusual, and I never forgot it. And I still haven't figured out what it was all about, but there was definitely some kind of strong feeling of watching the train coming out many miles out, it seemed, and slowly coming and approaching and then disappearing. So that's my experience.
Oh, that's very beautiful, and it's a very important point to see, is since God knows us each individually, He works with us in the way that He knows will reach us with the best effect. So, for instance, my husband was, I hope, coming into the church. He was on his way into the church, but whereas I was thinking it was any day, it took another 10 years. But when we were living in Rome, where I was getting we were trying to get a dispensation, which we got from his previous marriage. We used to go to this church, which is a very famous miracle church called the Gesù. It's a Jesuit church, and it has all these emblems of people who got miracles praying in front of this gigantic, very, very graphic crucifix, full of holes and blood and all that. So I used to like to pray there. So I was always praying for some big miracle that would bring him into the church. Well, the thing that actually had the greatest effect on him was when he was having a surgery. He had severe asthma. He was disabled with asthma, and he went to a clinic in Denver where they had special ways of cleaning out all the cavities in the nasal area, all this stuff. And afterwards, he was in great pain, and during this great pain after the surgery, he said he felt that that Jesus was bringing him into his Jesus pain. And at that moment, he really had this personal experience of Jesus. You know, I could never have concocted that experience, right?
Right.
Nope.
So, you know, I wanted him to see beautiful visions. And since he did suffer for a good 30 years of his life with asthma attacks and all this possibility of uniting his heart to that of Jesus in the midst of these sufferings was much more important for him than to have, for instance, seen the face of Jesus come alive, you know? So we need to realize this and just pray for whatever will bring us closer to him instead of saying, you know, how come that one got this locution and sees visions and I don't get those when I'm a better Catholic than Rhonda is? You know, that kind of way of thinking is foolish because he's reaching you the way you need. And and since you mentioned Mother Teresa, here Mother Teresa was who got these huge visions and locutions which led her to start the order where before she was a sister, but she was a geography teacher. She certainly never thought she would become the most famous woman in the entire world in the 20th century from being a geography teacher. Right. Okay, so here she's getting these visions and locutions that lead her to take care of the poorest of the poor, which is certainly no glamorous, world-famous role, right? And then she gets this long, decades-long dark night of the soul where she doesn't experience any of these mystical things at all. And she lived through that just pure faith and seeing Jesus in, as she used to put it, the distressing disguise of the poorest of the poor. So she did see Jesus, but in their faces instead of in mystical visions.
Good point.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to just share a story. I had a Protestant pastor friend that I used to have coffee with often, and we were real good friends. And he was telling me this one morning, he said, well, I made my hospital calls yesterday. When, you know, I went to the hospital, called on all my parishioners. And I said, you know, when you go around and do that, you should lay hands on these people and pray for them for peace or for healing or, you know, whatever. Oh, he said, I did that once. I'll never do that again. Huh. I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, I prayed for this fellow, and I laid hands on him, and he died that night. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain it to his wife. And I said, well, it's very simple. It's very simple. This is what I told him. I said, we pray, God heals. Don't get the two mixed up.
Right.
We pray, God heals. But there's another story I have, too, before you take over there, Jim. Maybe I told you this one before about the little boy that had a red flag and he could stop the trains. Richard, remind me of it.
Uh-huh.
Did I tell you? No,
I never heard it.
Okay, well, there's this little boy. He had a little red flag. And he's standing by the railroad tracks this one day. And this fellow comes up and he said, what do you got that little red flag for? Oh, he says, when I get here and I wave this little, if there's a train coming, I wave this little red flag and the train stops. He says, oh, come on. Don't try to tell me that. There's no station here. There's no reason for the train to stop. Well, he says, it works. I just wave my little red flag, and if the train is coming, he'll stop. So sure enough, here's a train coming down the tracks, and it's starting to slow down because he's waving his little red flag. And it comes to a complete stop, and the motorman then reaches down and picks up this little boy and puts him in his lap. And the little boy yells out the window to the man, "He's my daddy."
Oh, that's a great story. All right.
And that's a good example for us because we want to have that kind of relationship with our daddy, right?
Yeah.
When we wave our little red flag, the train stops.
Right.
Thank you, Richard.
You know, there's a miracle that occurs every day in every city, in every Catholic church that many people have doubts about. I'm going to talk about that for a minute or two here. I've got in my hand what looks like an oversized holy card, picture of a monstrance, very ornate monstrance holding the Eucharist.
Yeah.
And, okay, I think maybe you know where I'm going with this. I'm going to read a very short thing on the back of the card. It says, in the 8th century, a priest, after pronouncing the words of consecration, had a strong temptation to doubt the real presence of Jesus in the host. Before the startled priest's eyes, the sacred host visibly changed into a circle of flesh. The consecrated wine was transformed into bright red blood, coagulating into 5 small clots. 4 authentications have been performed throughout the centuries, but the last verification, ordered by the Holy See in 1970, is the most scientifically complete. This is what the scientists and the doctors found. Remember now, this appeared as a little piece of bread during the consecration and then converted into flesh. The flesh is, okay, here's the list. The flesh is real human flesh, and the blood is real human blood. The flesh is composed of cardiac muscular tissue, that's the heart, having no trace whatsoever of any materials or agents used for preservation. Both the flesh and blood belong to the same blood type, AB. The proteins in the blood are in the same proportion as those found in normal fresh blood, and it's been there since the 8th century. This ongoing miracle is visible even to this day after more than 1,200 years of existence. The host flesh appears rose-colored when backlighted. The color of the 5 clots of coagulated blood is a brownish-red hue. Now, if anyone doubts the real presence of Christ, the body and blood of Christ in the host, they need to consider that. Mm-hmm. I've also known a priest, this was some years ago, was telling this story. He was concelebrating with another priest who was the main celebrant. And in the sacristy, as they were getting ready for the Mass, the celebrant said that he really had doubts about all of this, that was really the body and blood of Christ. And, they just kind of said that just before the Mass. So they go out and the Mass starts, gets to the raising of the host. When he raised the host, which appeared to be a little wafer of white bread, the host started bleeding, and the blood ran down his hands, and he turns and whispers to the priest that I knew and says, "What do I do now?" and the second priest says, "Just continue the Mass." And he put a cloth underneath to catch the blood, but the Mass continued, and that priest no longer had any doubts, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
And the last one that I know about happened in the Vatican. I think it was 1998 with John Paul II. He was holding a private Mass for a woman who had done a lot of work for the church. And as he reached out to give her the host, it collapsed into a piece of flesh, right before their eyes. There were maybe a dozen people in the room that saw this, and I presume they've preserved that somewhere in the Vatican as well. The bottom line, that little piece of bread may appear like a little piece of bread, but after consecration it is the body and contains the blood of Christ.
There's another one that happened recently in Argentina. I think the details are revealed by Pope Francis. It was in his area, and I don't remember all the details, but you can Google it, I think, on the internet, Miracle in Argentina.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But Rhonda, if you remember the story remember Jim Anderson, the guy from Missouri? Remember how
Which story?
The one where he was a Eucharistic minister?
No, you tell it. I forgot. I don't remember the details.
I can't remember all the details, but I'm going to listen to it again and write those down because that was a good one.
To the panel, that subject's going to come up again the end of April or first week of May.
Okay.
Hour session. So collect all that information and be ready. Pardon?
Oh, okay. Tell them exactly when this is going to be.
It'll be the first Friday of May.
Okay.
And the topic is wherever I've got it written down. Hold on. The topic
let me just say to you, Jim Anderson is a man who works for Caterpillar, the huge company that does all this construction and, builds things. And so I find it thrilling because many of us are philosophy teachers who probably haven't ever worked in that kind of milieu, that someone like this heard of our program, is listening to it, and actually became a Catholic through reading books about the Catholic faith.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's happening all the time. But it's good to have that. His testimony was beautiful on one of your programs there, Rhonda.
Jim here, I'd like to make a connection and raise a question by way of story. Excuse me. Bob read to us from the scripture reading today's liturgy. And not so long ago, it might have been 2 or 3 or 4 days ago, we had the account of Dives and Lazarus. And Dives is the rich man, and Lazarus is at the gates of Dives' house, and the rich man goes past Lazarus each day. Well, time passes, and the rich man dies, and Lazarus dies as well. And the rich man is feeling the fires of Gehenna, and Lazarus is in Abraham's bosom. And the rich man calls out, Father Abraham, send Lazarus to speak to my brothers. And the response is, well, they have Moses and the prophets. If they won't listen to them, they won't even listen to somebody who has come from the dead. And that raises in my mind the question of the evangelical point of miracles and the what could you say, the probative, the proof value of miracles. And I always, I hope, am open to miracle stories, and I take some of them, at least, to be true. And yet I don't think of miracles as coercive. I don't think of miracles as forcing belief. And the idea that Lazarus would come and speak to the rich man's brother, and thereby compel their belief. Well, the idea, I think, is if these brothers who are following in their rich brother's footsteps to their ruin, if they won't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't hear this either. And so when I hear some stories about the Eucharist, the thought crosses my mind, well, why don't we have teams of scientists come and do high-tech filming of the whole event, and, well, our evangelization could take the form of showing this material. And we could do similar things with, say, the Shroud of Turin. And well, I suppose we could.
Oh, no, Jim, actually, this has been done, and some people are greatly moved by those scientific proof.
My point,
some people won't be because they're just resistant.
Precisely. And the idea that I had in mind, the fantasy I had in mind was investing millions and millions of dollars and using this as the key method of evangelization. And of course, the church doesn't. I don't think the church should. Those who have these experiences, I think, in a way, are like the woman with the flow of blood who has the occasion to touch the cloak of Christ, and that's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's to a miracle, but we don't, as the chosen people, Old Testament, New Testament together, we don't rely on this sort of thing. It's an occasional sort of thing, and it connects with what we do have is the ongoing testimony of Moses and the prophets and the life of Christ. And I want to say that to put miracles, contemporary miracles, in the context that I think they belong.
Well, the way I look at it, as far as this Holy Spirit, we don't know. In other words, like this program, we don't know how many people are going to be touched by this. In other words, like you don't need a scientific thing. For example, like I had this fellow on our program, Life in the Spirit, which happens every Wednesday at 4 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, and it's called Life in the Spirit. And I had a testimony from a man. I was doing a Life of the Spirit seminar over in Southington, Connecticut, and I met this man, and his story is so fantastic. He started to get into drinking and drugs in high school, and I think he was doing it for maybe 30 years. And he got to the end. I mean, he just didn't know what to do. I mean, he was despairing. I mean, he was probably, I don't know if he thought about suicide, but I'm sure he did. I don't remember all the details. But somehow he and his brother decided to go to the movie, The Passion of Christ. Okay? And that was the start of his conversion. There was something that when Jesus came out of this cave, it just overtook this man. He was just overtaken by the Holy Spirit. And that was the start. It took about, like you say with your husband, Rhonda, it took about 10 years. But today he's a strong Catholic. He's praying the rosary, and he's, doing all these things, and he wanted to be baptized in the Holy Spirit at this Life in the Spirit seminar. I mean, these miracles can happen in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think as Ron just said a little while ago, the Lord reaches us where we are, not where someone else is, and so these things happen, and some gifts are given only once. Some few people keep the same gift as, for instance, healing. They may have a gift of healing for quite some time, but most people, and that's my experience too, the healing gift is only given for a specific occasion. I think, Bob, we're out of time.
Yes.
Okay, let me mention next week our topic is, what do Christians mean by the word love? What do Christians mean by the word love? That's our topic for next week. Okay.
And so we'll see you next week. In the meantime, may God bless each and every one of you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
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 We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.